Hi, friends. I'm Martha Quinn. I'm proud to work at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute with Dr. Sharon Ramey and Dr. Stephanie DeLuca, who are joining us today. They are members of our neuromotor research clinic, and they are our leaders who have been very critical in developing the therapies that are being researched in the many different studies under the umbrella of Acquire. I wanted to give us some time today to just kind of learn about some of the background that many different families have entered into these various studies to improve the care for their children, and hoping that we can get some common language and terms that we agree upon so that our future meetings will be that much more enjoyable. Stephanie, I would love to talk with you to help us understand, how was this basic thought, even early on, probably before it was legitimately called a therapy, how was this thought developed? And what was the underlying evidence that led you to want to begin this research?
The basic thought, this came out of actually uh, my wanting to enter graduate school. I had worked in a lab that was responsible in part for constraint-induced movement therapy for adults. And I literally entered graduate school wanting to develop a similar protocol for children. And interviewed with Sharon and her husband Craig with that concept in mind. And that kind of laid the groundwork for Sharon and I to begin a discussion that we also brought a colleague in, Dr. Karen Eccles, who is also a student of Sharon. And so that kind of started the process where we all began discussing the whole concepts that ultimately led to Acquire.
Sharon, knowing that you were already observed as a leader in this field, tell me about the research that you had conducted up until this point that really started to define the therapeutic approaches that we now reference in the Acquire studies.
Very often parents are told your children will be able to do this and no more, or your children will never be able to do that. So let's figure out an alternative way. And I think why Stephanie and I and Dr. Karen Eccles were such a good team is we don't think that way. Let's try. And so what we often do is build on the success of others and take it to a new level. So we combine knowledge about basic learning, how the brain and behavior develop, and what are the barriers, what are the facilitators. And then I just think of the children who've come to our Acquire clinic and studies as children who are entering the Olympics of growth and development. They work so hard, and we're there to guide them through that therapeutic process. So we push the limits in ways that are fun, that are important, and that the children themselves see the reward of their effort. So I just think we said, let's try to reach new levels with our children. And that's what our very first case history that Stephanie DeLuca did as a graduate student, the first randomized control trial actually ever about something named constraint-induced movement therapy that we did as a team. And then we went to replicating it and doing it with different ages of children and children who had different starting levels of skills. And it's just been the greatest ride over the last 20 years I could have imagined, because we said the sky's the limit.
I know that in the beginning, you were looking at children who had the ability for half of their body to be functioning in a more normal manner. The half of the body wasn't developing at the same stage. Tell me about why that was the initial approach that you were trying to understand, and what you learned from targeting that particular lack of development in a child.
Um, So if you go back to the history that we started with, the acquire model again was based on constraint-induced movement therapy, which was developed for adults who have had a stroke. And a stroke often presents in a similar manner, so that one side of the body is impaired and the other side of the body, it functions fairly normally. And so we were really trying to replicate that process in children. And so that's why we focused on that particular presenting diagnosis. Although one of the things that is often not understood in the literature is our very first child actually had quadriparesis, which means that she had all four limbs that were impacted by, that were delayed in development. But she did present with one side of the body that was much more functional than the other side of the body. And I think that's important to notice because it not only taught us something about children who have differences in their sides, but it also laid the groundwork for us having an understanding that the acquire model might be successful for other etiologies. And ultimately, though, however, after that first child, we went on and we did the first randomized controlled trial on children with, again, with differences where they presented with one side of the body that was very, that looked typical, and the other side of the body that had limitations. And that kind of laid the groundwork for future trials that are now even include and are even more precisely aimed at stroke.
Thank you so much for helping us to understand. I know that, Sharon, some of our families, I think, are very curious about how research in the world of science and health evolves. And so I was curious if you might be able to tell us more about kind of the details of how large research projects progress and how this went from that original study to the multiple studies and multiple sites that have evolved into the large study we frequently refer to, or studies we refer to today.
Well, first of all, science evolves. So you get an idea and you test it out. And as scientists, we're trained to be skeptics. And even when we discover something, we're supposed to say, oh, maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe we got it wrong. We better show it again. And so we have very high standards of proof. So it's not just a matter of clinical impression or opinion. So when we did a study with a small number of children, we said, let's do it again. That's replication. Let's see if people who aren't as passionate about it as we are can learn to do it just as well, or maybe even better than we did it. So what we do is we take an idea from one child to a small number of children, to multiple places with multiple therapists and families that come from all sorts of different backgrounds and children of different ages and abilities. And we just do it again and again, and we vary it. And what our team is well known for is we are testing the effects of different approaches that might look to some people to be almost the same, but we want to know, well, if a child gets 3 hours of therapy or 6 hours a day for a whole month, does it matter? I mean, both of those are like pretty big dosages. How much more do you get, if anything, from the biggest dose compared to another dose that's not quite so big? Or there's different ways of again, of delivering the treatment, whether we constrain the child's unimpaired arm and hand and focus on the side that is hemiparetic, the side that's not functioning so well, or do we work on both arms because we live in a world where you use both sides of your body? Which is better, or are they just as good? And so we are always challenging and moving ahead so that by the time our discoveries are ready to be put into practice to benefit thousands of children, we've really have confidence that these findings are currently representing the most accurate knowledge about what works for whom at what age.
Stephanie, I would like for you to help us understand, how do you guys share information with other scientists? And how is your knowledge being shared in the scientific community?
So I think that the most common way that people think about sharing knowledge through the scientific community is through publications. And so that's kind of the first box. But I think there's also lots of other ways. We share knowledge through presentations at conferences. That's probably a second way. But one of the things that's always amazed me about this whole process is I think we even share scientific knowledge because we interact with the parents. And so the parents become quite sophisticated nowadays, and they talk to each other, and they even talk to other scientists. And I think one of the strengths that we've always built into our methodology is that we try to listen to those parents. And we try to learn from what not only the parents say, but we try to teach the parents, and we try to learn from what parents have bring us from their other experiences with clinicians and with other labs and other people that they've interacted with. So I think you can't really think about dissemination of knowledge as a one-pronged approach. There's actually lots of different ways that we disseminate our knowledge. And I think that that is a big advantageous portion of what we do, is that we don't think about it as one way to disseminate knowledge. We think about it as multiple ways, but also a two-way street. We're always trying to learn from, even if we present at a conference, if you get a question, sometimes that reshapes what you're thinking about or how you are interpreting what you're are finding or what you've assumed. And so I think it's always a two-way highway.
So Sharon, can you talk to us about how the actual clinic has evolved? I know that we have multiple therapists who work out of Roanoke at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute. How has that been able to evolve so that more children in our country have been able to participate in these studies?
In many of our studies, we work with people at other centers and train their therapists. We certify them that they have the background knowledge and the actual demonstrated skills. They show us that they know how to do this. And then there's sort of this spread effect where they work. We have people now in 3 different cities setting up their own clinics, building on the skills of people we have trained. They're training students and other colleagues and helping expand the reach of what we're doing. And we've had an amazing opportunity to work in foreign countries, to be invited. Our therapists have visited many continents, and we find a receptivity even in places that historically have been low-income countries or countries facing many resource issues. These individuals are so open to knowledge and to helping children, and we find mothers and fathers throughout the world wanting to participate. So it's been very rewarding. There's a big spread effect, and we hope to do even more of that. My dream would be we'd have an ongoing clinic that would be open where people can come spend time here with us in Roanoke or having us come to them, so that lots of people can be certified and also can try out new versions, and we'll learn from them. Back to the two-way street Stephanie DeLuca was just speaking about. It's a two-way street to take what works and find even new ways to expand it.
For those of us who have not studied this in depth as you and Stephanie, how is a choir different than just really good therapy?
Well, it builds on good therapy principles, of course. Children have to have fun, but we see the child and the family is at the heart of it. They have to be engaged. And what we do is we apply principles that come from learning theory. We use reinforcement. We set goals that the child achieves and keep building and building and building on those through a process called operant conditioning, successive approximations. These are skills used in a lot of different kinds of therapy. And in addition, all of our therapies are concentrated high dosage. So rather than a few hours a week all year long, we place great emphasis on the child rapidly acquiring lots of new skills so the child has confidence and can go out and really see how the child's efforts result in change. So it's very success oriented. And we try to do it in natural environments. So rather than come into a kind of sterile clinic and just practice skills sitting at a table with a certain game, we build on the things that the children like to do, the favorite things, or we bring in something brand new that's so exciting they really want to try it. So we do treatment in natural environments, in a home or a home-like setting or in the preschool. So it's part of the child's everyday world. And we see parents as partners. Some people do therapy that's only given by parents. Sometimes it's only by the therapist. We try to combine both. So those are some of the things that make our therapy different from just good therapy.
Thank you very much. We hope that our friends of a choir are going to join us at our next meeting, which is on March the 21st, coming up in a few weeks, and we'll be able to talk more about the amazing research that you guys are doing.